Okay, well, welcome everyone to this webinar hosted by IPXO on cyber threat mitigation. Before we start in, I just wanted to introduce our panelists here. But before I do that, I just wanted to give an idea about what this webinar is all about. We all hear about cyber threat mitigation. We hear about internet security. Any one of us that are network operators or working in the internet, these are big buzzwords for us today. And I think that, people are scampering around, finding their tactics on how to mitigate cyber threats. And I think first we need to understand a little bit about what is actually going on out there. And there's a lot of observation going on. There's a lot of analysis being done, information being shared out there that helps us a little bit with the intelligence to develop better ways to mitigate some of these cyber threats. But how do we actually move from abuse observability and intelligence to ultimately abuse prevention? And is that even possible? And that's one of the areas of concentration that we wanted to have on this first webinar that we're touching on cyber threat mitigation. So we've gathered several industry experts here to help us with this and give us maybe a better understanding of this space. Each one of them comes from varying backgrounds in maybe cyber threat mitigation or internet security in general. So we've got a varying broad range. And what I'd like to do is, with this webinar, you, the audience, at any time, we'd like to make it as inclusive as possible. So at any time, there is a chat function on here. You can pose a question, you can stop us in the agenda, and we will be more than happy to answer that question as best we can, because I think that inclusiveness gives us the information sharing kind of and the knowledge share that we want to have with webinars like this. That's the whole aim. So I'll introduce our panelists here. We have Zoltan Balazs from CUJO AI. We have Thomas Johnson from DEFT. We have Andreas Lepine from IPXO, and Virgil Troika from Voxility. Hello. Cheers, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this panel today. And I'm going to just jump right in so that we've got as much time as we can on the questions we want to cover. So in the agenda, kind of walking through our agenda, what sort of cyber threats are we talking about? And are these types of threats changing in the internet space? Maybe I can point that question at Zoltan. Maybe you can take us through this.
Yeah, one of the number one reasons I love IT security, because it's changing so fast. And practically all of the advices we had like 10 or 20 years ago, they are now obsolete and maybe counterintuitive. One of the reasons security landscape changes so much is because all of our securities are mostly reacting to stuff. And this means that once we as an industry figure out how we can defend against something, the attackers, they are just changing tactics. They are trying to find new source of revenue, and then we have a new job to do and figure out how to defend against stuff. For example, we have ransomware. I'm sure I don't have to introduce anyone what ransomware does. But once we figured out how we can protect against ransomware with proper backup procedures, they just change tactics and they are stealing all the essential data. And now they are both trying to ransom us by encrypting our data and ransoming us by they want to leak our data. That's called doxware, for example. So that's an interesting change of tactics. And nowadays, blockchain is, for example, and cryptocurrency is a big buzzword. And we as researchers have seen a significant rise in the scam landscape, how people try to scam others. And for example, it happened like 1 or 2 months ago that one scam stole $200 million worth of cryptocurrency assets. So yeah, that's pretty much interesting, I have to say. And yeah, the attackers, they don't really care how they are stealing the money, as long as it's easy money for them.
Okay. So wherever we're seeing the internet develop kind of into industry and other industries, we're seeing the cyber threats increasing with it. So is AI and automation, because this is your space here, Zoltan, like with CUJO AI, is AI and automation able to increase the observability and kind of detect the anomalies that are going out there?
Surely it can. I like to think of machine learning as a good tool that people have more free time to do better researches. Like machine learning is very useful to do tedious human work at a very large scale for very cheap. And with the help of machine learning and maybe AI, a significant amount of human work can be done. And everyone knows there's a huge shortage in IT security talent. So whatever we can automate, that's always a big win.
Okay. And so is this happening in a coordinated manner? Tell me that.
Depends. I mean, everyone is jumping from the industry point of view whenever they find some technology can work. I mean, no one is coordinating that besides pure economics, I have to say. But yeah, on the other hand, I believe that one of the good things in IT security is there's good piece of collaboration between the different companies.
Okay. All right. So, and on that, what types of threats can we expect to see rise or develop in the coming years? Thomas?
Well, I think I've been giving this a little bit of thought, and while I don't know that we can predict the future, I think there's going to be just more of a monetization of some of these threats. Never in a million years would I have thought ransomware would even be a thing. Now it is a thing, and I think we've taken a lot of steps to mitigate that in a lot of ways. But to Zoltan's point, they just keep pivoting and changing things up. And now not only is encrypting your data a thing and asking for a key in exchange for a ransom payment, they're also exfiltrating that data and threatening to publish it. So I think we're going to see a constant pivot around monetization of some of this stuff. And I think the warriors that are out there that are looking to just do damage and disruption are probably, that they're still going to be there, but it'll be fewer and fewer, especially if there's like some kind of a financial component to this.
All right. Okay. So, and do you think then this will be monopolized? Like when you start talking about monetizing things, I mean, where are we going with this?
I just think it's with all of the things that are out there, you see that there's like, ransomware as a service and things that are easily available for people. I don't see why the threat vectors are going to go in that direction. It's going to just ramp up. People are going to get more and more creative and ways to precipitate threats to organizations, and they're going to probably start looking for some high dollar targets, people that are willing to pay.
Okay, so then, like, taking a look at this, like, so then how does the little guy get involved in this? Because I can see that, with what you've just said with both of you, obviously, like the larger organizations probably have capital to throw at this. But how does a smaller network deal with this? Where do they come into the picture here? How do they tap into this?
That's a great question, and I don't know if I have a great answer for that other than leveraging some of the tools that are out there, cybersecurity awareness, even tapping into some of the organizations that are out there that, give you some intelligence on some of the things that are happening, using good information security, hygiene also, and then, testing the folks that are in your organization so that they don't, click on links, go to malicious websites. So I think it's really kind of a huge answer to that question, really.
If I may add on top of that, so basically, when we talk about cyber threat intelligence, like you mentioned, it's if you want to do it right, most probably you will have to have quite a lot of resources and capacity to do it. And small organizations are most probably not in a position to perform such analysis. You might think that state might do that. State, I mean the government or someone in a position of power, like we kind of trust them to collect our taxes. We trust them to hand me my speeding ticket and other things. But if you look at the state, they are kind of sluggish at adopting or being up to speed, especially having in mind that there's probably not a single state in the world that would do that in a coordinated manner, if we even take aside politics and rivalries and other things. So if we look at the current situation, we should probably look back to the communities of both offensive and defensive sides that would be able to share that information amongst them. Security researchers, commercial and open source communities of security intelligence, they should and they are doing that, maybe not to the extent that we would want them to do. But generally speaking, that there's a saying that you can achieve like 95 to 98% of security with quite modest investment and both intellectual and financial. And there's always a premium segment for someone to have to do faster, better, more, and so on. But our goal should be to kind of make the cyber threat intelligence available beyond the Fortune 500 companies, so that everybody could be kind of able to tap into that and protect their business to a certain level, their business, their personal information to a certain level. But then again, large companies will definitely go further and do more. And as we can see, the state is kind of lagging behind and leaving to big tech to figure out the solution to the problem. And will probably come in a bit later when the processes will be done and things that will be more or less normal again.
Okay.
So today I would say it's sharing and communities.
So what you're saying then, go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, if I can add something to what Andrews just said regarding
Absolutely.
the state involvement. Like just this Monday, I saw this article where Singapore is actually getting involved in this, and they are actually licensing cybersecurity providers in order to improve the services they provide further to the end customer. So they are actively involved in this, and they will monitor the activities, and they will issue licenses for each cybersecurity company.
Okay, so there's some kind of vetting process that's happening in like kind of maybe governance or regulatory space. So what I'm hearing then is that this is basically becoming an industry, just like many other facets of the internet in its development. Now, I've heard something very interesting come out of a few of you, and that's the community element to this. And I do want to touch on that a little bit later in this webinar, but I'm going to bring us back into taking a look very just quickly at the governance part. Where are we with the regulatory bodies and maybe the public sector on this space? Where are we? Just very briefly. I don't want to dig too deep in here, but is it keeping up? Is it behind? Is it aware? Involved?
I think it's lagging behind. I think traditionally, especially in the regulatory space in the U.S., there's probably a rare occasion that the regulations are exceeding or superseding what's actually happening out there. There's quite a lag behind here.
Okay.
I'm not sure about anyone else.
In Europe?
Same in Europe. It's always lagging behind.
It's more or less the case with all of the legislatory things. And we have to be fair, we gave them kind of tens of hundreds of years to figure out how to collect taxes and how to be a policeman. And this is a very widely developing area, cyber threat intelligence or cybersecurity.
Sure.
So they are they need some more time for us to figure out internally first, and then kind of give them on the plate what is happening.
Okay. All right. So much like many other facets of the internet, they're probably not keeping up, which again kind of springs me over to the community area, because then that means the industry needs to kind of develop these things on its own. And like I said, we're going to touch much more deeply into the community aspect of it. But I like that direction, and I'm very interested to see what we'll say there. Is prevention better than a cure? And actually, is this ultimately a realistic goal? Somebody want to comment on that?
I think it depends always that usually, yes, prevention is better than the cure, but there are some rare cases where we try too hard to protect something and we lose focus. One of my topics I really like to talk about are, for example, free antivirus systems, where they are collecting so much data from your computer that practically one can say that, hey, it's not protecting my data, but it's stealing my data. And there have been known cases in the past where an antivirus company already owned a marketing company, and they were practically internally selling these data collected through AV to the marketing company.
So then we go back to the monetization part again, right?
Yeah. So there's no free lunch on the internet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You can always remember the crypto miner on the antivirus, and that kind of explains a little bit about the things.
Yes, I mean, cryptojacking is a thing, no, right now. So they hijack your computer and they use it for crypto mining.
All right.
I would maybe want to kind of echo what Zoltan is saying, that there's probably not a cure, 100% cure, and then you have to balance the prevention versus the cure. It's like in medicine. You try to prevent as much as possible, but you still have to have that magic pill that will help you when things go wild. And I think the more you focus on prevention, the less often you will need the actual cure. The less often you will end up in a situation where you need to recover your systems, or you need to restore something and things go completely sideways. So that has to be in a balance, but probably more on a prevention side, at least from my perspective.
I think in some cases the cure might be too gigantic. If you start looking at root cause analysis on some of these things, if you just look at the biggest threat vector for ransomware is via email. How come we have not been able to reform how email happens? Authenticated email, even certificate-based email, which is actually a thing nobody uses. We've got DMARC and DKIM that is not widely out there. I think some of these are just so gigantic and huge to digest. It's hard for somebody to get their arms around that, or at least an entity, right?
And you must also take into consideration the type of cyber threat, because if you're talking about DDoS attacks as an example, then we can only think about prevention rather than the cure, because the cure is already too late in this case.
Yep. Okay, so if we start looking at practices, because we're sliding into a little bit of maybe practices in this area, how important or even effective is the know your customer practice? Because this is something that is very, very predominant these days. I mean, the whole KYC bit is quite heavy in most areas. So how important is this, Virgil?
Well, a proper KYC policy can help you make a risk assessment and drastically lower that risk. I mean, furthermore, there are a lot of positive side effects along with it, I may say. I mean, I think there are like 4 main things you need to do, like identify the customer, as in get info about his business, verify the client's true identity when he provides his billing details, as an example. You should verify those, and then understand what activities he's doing and the source of his funding, and maybe even monitor his activity in your network for the first couple of months, just to see what he's doing. I mean, not access to his data, but just to see if you're getting abuse complaints or things like that. I mean, at Voxility, by doing this, like 11, 12 years ago, we actually lowered the risk of a network security breach in the first place, and then we lowered the number of abuse-related issues that we were getting, and in the same time, even lowered the support tickets numbers, which, as a side effect, as I was saying earlier, provided our engineers with spare time to focus on improving the current services and develop new ones, or even from the sales perspective team, on the sales part, the business can get better leads, can get bigger contracts on a longer term, and of course, trustworthy customers, which of course they will provide financial stability for the company long term.
Honesty and transparency. That's something we're going to touch on as well. Actually, Charles, we have a question from Charles. I wish I had a prize for him for the first question of the webinar. And he's asking, now are free antivirus softwares trustworthy? Who wants to answer that?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say no.
Okay.
As long as you pay for the operating system that maybe includes native antivirus, it might be trustworthy. But if you buy a bundled something with something that gives you 12 months free, and then you have to pay you have to be a bit more careful in this case.
Okay. And I bet a follow-up to that question would be, okay, so there's these free antivirus softwares out there. If you're saying they're not trustworthy, are there any off the top of your head that you think are better than others?
Actually, I was working in the AV testing industry for 5 years, but I'm not sure I want to say any free marketing for these antivirus vendors.
Okay.
Clearly, there are vendors who are better than others. Usually, what I tell to my friends that even though these independent tests are not perfect, but if 5 different testers says that, hey, this AV is in the top 3, then that's a good sign. And if 5 different antivirus vendors says that it doesn't do a thing, then probably you should not trust them.
Then run.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It's probably like everything with cyber threat intelligence. You cannot just grab first one on the Google search or any other search that you fancy. You have to do your research and your homework before employing something.
Okay. All right. So we need to do our homework there. I hope that answers your question, Charles. So blacklists, that's another kind of practice or a tool that's being used. So the role of blacklists, are they effective?
It depends. Like it's a very cheap first line of defense, but one should not rely on these deny lists only. Like you should do it because it's the cheapest way of protecting stuff, but you need layered defenses and other means of detecting bad things because stuff is changing pretty quickly. Let me give you an example. For example, we are trying to protect smart homes from external threats. And even though we have a list of known bad IP addresses on the internet, they are constantly infecting others. And these others are trying to infect others. And there's no way to follow up these with these static lists. So we have to come up with better solutions.
It's funny because no other question, ignites more discussion and heated debate in our organization than that question for sure.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. There are 2 camps. One that says it's completely useless, and the other one that believes at least you are taking care of the low-hanging fruit.
Okay.
Which that's what I agree with.
Okay.
I would slightly maybe twist the blacklist from using it as a prevention method to maybe using it as an indicator. And that comes again from our IPXO background, where you kind of have a lot of IP addresses and different customers running around you. So the blacklists that are available on the market, and if some IP addresses start spawning around in those blacklists, that is a very good indicator that your customer is probably doing something that he or she shouldn't be doing. At least that is an indicator to start looking a bit deeper or closer to the behavior. It's not that simple, maybe in our position where we are not actually on the traffic and we cannot see what exactly they are doing. But collecting all of that information, blacklists, maybe a sudden kind of spur in dynamic DNS records being created, comparing to how that customer looked like a month ago or a week ago, it's a pretty good indicator for to start looking at the things. And if not possible to stop, if we are not possible to stop the malicious activity, at least we can try and share it with the wider community, flag up the ASNs that are advertising those IP addresses, and do something around it, rather than just applying it as a block list, and as Thomas said, kind of block the low-hanging fruit and catch some of the bad guys. Mm-hmm. But I'm looking at that not from perspective protecting from them, but from the perspective of understanding what my customers are doing, mm-hmm. and then acting upon that so that other people don't have to use block lists as a block list for incoming traffic.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so early in this question, we kind of touched on maybe transparency and honesty. How important are these in the cyber threat arena? Area of transparency and honesty.
Well,
are they even there?
If I can, transparency in cybersecurity, I think is good for both the customer and the industry itself. I mean, I think that customers should have access to as much information as possible, including benchmarks or, I don't know, test results during their evaluation process. And in the same time, transparency can encourage other companies, like even competition, to invest more in their cybersecurity, and in the same time to encourage vendors to improve and innovate their products on this part, their cybersecurity products.
And do you think there's enough of this going on, or is this a growing space, Virgo?
I think it's a growing space. There's not enough going on.
Okay. So touching on that and coming into maybe going a little bit into the community arena, because I think we'll have a good discussion in this part. Can we as a community be more proactive, or are we just kind of reactively solving problems now? Zoltan?
As I already mentioned, I think we have a great community here. For example, I'm using Twitter for InfoSec news, and there's a lot of great information sharing there. But money drives the world. So whenever it comes to sharing data, which might hurt the intellectual property or the sales or whatever, it's clear that professionals who are hired by these companies, they will not share everything. And from one point of view, it's a sad thing, but I think it's understandable.
Okay. So from that point, and you mentioned something interesting, how do we go about observing or monitoring these developments? Where do you go without fully subscribing to some kind of proprietary solution? Where do you go to find out about cyber threat mitigation or internet security issues? What are your resources there?
Well, like Zoltan said, I think Twitter is a huge resource, at least for us, if we want to get really fast understanding of what's going on, threats in the wild, indicators of compromise. A lot of people in the community do look to Twitter to socialize that. I think there's a level of anonymity there as well, so people might feel a little bit more inclined to drop some things out there. And I certainly subscribe to a number of feeds on Twitter. So
you folks are telling me that you're using social media as a sort of kind of community way of sharing your information. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes.
When something happens, that's the first place where you find out the news, and then it's like a snowball. You keep people commenting on it and find out new information, and maybe even solutions or many other things related to that specific case.
So there's an active community out there on social media, because we are going to talk about community. I think when we look at the internet space, we always see community as nogs or areas where people used to come together socially and kind of exchange all this information. And from what I'm hearing now, all of you have agreed that social media is the place you go, I guess, to get your community inputs. Does that mean that the community way of working is changing, of how the information is being exchanged?
Probably not the only place where we go, but on the other hand, social media is also kind of a stick with two ends, like any other stick. So some people are inclined to share, and some companies maybe not that inclined to share the incidents, what exactly has happened, or share that information. But they always have to have in mind that if somebody leaks something, they will have to fight a rumor mill rather than dosing the information at their comfortable pace and providing the amount of information they are comfortable with to their customers and being honest as much as possible, so that they cannot be social media cannot be used to intimidate them by the threat actors on that side. So I would say it's social media and the amount of information being shared there and the amount of people are accessing it kind of keeps us honest a little bit, at least more honest than it used to be prior to social media, where we used to have a traditional media, even though the electronic version of it, but still not that wide reach and not that fast reach.
Exactly.
Okay. And so, like, and social media, now we've touched on Twitter, everybody's kind of mentioned it. Is there a particular Twitter feed that you can maybe type into the chat here that you use, that you would like to share, that you think is solid enough for people to get information from? Maybe you guys can, if you're willing to do that, can do that over the course of our discussion here. We have some questions that have come in here. I see the question, SOC in-house versus outsource, with a question mark.
I would like to answer this. It depends.
Go for it.
If you have the money and you can find the talented people, I would vote for in-house. But most companies, they don't have the money or they can't find talented people. So they are forced to do the outsource version. I think that's the easy reality here.
Okay, so it comes down to money again.
You can always choose some of the open source projects that are available if you have people, but you don't have money. But they are, it's completely like you said.
But even if you do have money, you may not find the people. There's like a report saying that we are lacking more than 3 million security engineers on the global
I totally
market.
agree. Our biggest challenge is finding people. It's very rough in the United States.
Amazing, but it's still like a sort of a niche, like this cybersecurity part.
Right.
Nowadays, it's still a niche. I mean, there's still a lot of room to grow.
I have heard some rumors here in Hungary that one very big company started an SOC, and so they wanted to be the company who is doing SOC for everyone. And they couldn't find a single analyst, so they started with the pizza delivery guy being the analyst.
All right. Okay. Oh, wow.
Not sure if it's true, but it's a great story, I think.
Yes. I have another question
guys.
here. I have another question here from Drew. It's been said that cybersecurity is rarely a tech problem, but rather a leadership problem. Do you agree?
I agree.
I would say it depends on the level of leadership addressed in that question. So it most of the time it's a kind of lack of will or change of will and lack of commitment to certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's a certain element to leadership being a problem. You know, in the past, I've worked for some organizations that either hadn't taken security seriously or they didn't want to implement some of the security controls that would be a little bit either intrusive to an organization or prohibitive to an organization for moving initiatives forward. I mean, something as simple as doing regular phishing tests. I was formally asked by one of the presidents of the company to reduce the amount of time we spend on that because it was very intrusive to our employees. Shocking, right? So,
wow. Okay.
I think there's a lot of leadership and maybe even organizational culture issues there with cybersecurity too.
Okay. All right. I have another question here, and I'll just ask this one before we move along to the next agenda topic here. Are Instagram accounts easy to hack? Because lately there are many accounts compromised. Anything going on in the Instagram space?
I see a lot of bots on Instagram, that's for sure. So I'm not sure if that's, somehow that's doing that, but I'm pretty active on Instagram myself, and I get so many followers that are just, junk accounts, garbage accounts, and don't understand why. I'm not sure how that is a vector yet.
Yeah, what exactly are those bots? Like, what are they doing? What do you think they're doing?
I'm not really sure. I think time will tell. I think some of them are trying to precipitate maybe pornographic material, but some of them they just seem dormant. So I'm not sure if they're trying to mine information from my feed, for example. But there might be some social engineering tactics there that we're just not fully understanding yet. That's my guess.
Anyone else? Thank you, Thomas.
As far as I know, there's a huge problem for Instagram when it comes to account recovery. So someone steals your account and you try to contact support that, hey, I'm sending my passport, my ID, whatever, and you can see that I'm the legitimate original user of Instagram, and they will not recover your account. And yeah, for some people who live from Instagram, that's a pretty bad thing.
Okay.
I would generally probably want to note that it's not most probably it's not the issue of Instagram that is being hacked all the time. It's the issue of the endpoints that the users are using and the configuration of the user accounts themselves. So like shared passwords with other things that might leak out in a less secure environment, like not using multi-factor authentication, and lots of different things that lead to a hack of Instagram, which is just kind of by hack of the hack of their phones, their laptops that could lead to ransomware, and so on and so on. So it's more or less a problem of generic cybersecurity hygiene rather than the Instagram itself. It's probably more visible on the Instagram because Instagram is about visibility, but the problem lies on the user side and how they deal with cybersecurity on a daily basis.
Exactly. I'm not a huge Instagram user, but cybersecurity in the end is a people issue. People issue on both ends, both on the user side and on the hacker side. So,
okay. So throughout the webinar so far, I can hear that you're saying, yeah, working together makes sense, right? Sharing and working together makes sense. We've heard that social media is one of the areas where a lot of maybe community knowledge sharing is going on. Working closer together, is it possible? Because it hasn't happened to date. I mean, security's been kind of a buzzword for the last couple of years, and I'm not seeing a community in the classic sense kind of forming there. So, I think it's very valuable and powerful if we combined results and observations. But where is this happening?
well, if I can approach this question from a network operator internet security point of view, as I'm more involved in this field rather than ransomware or the other cyber threats, I mean, there is a network operator community out there that works together quite a lot and got us to where we are today in terms of internet security and stability. I mean, we have Internet Society, which is making sure that the internet stays robust and secure since 1992. It's a non-for-profit international organization. Then We have the network operators groups meetings, which are informal, but they are country-based or regional groups where people from the internet industry, usually influential people with influence, they gather and they exchange information. They work together. They keep in touch on their work and share news and updates and exchange best practices and make sure that that we have access to our preferred website or Netflix or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the NOGs that are going out there, it's pretty easy to tap into a network operator group wherever you would be, right? Are
Exactly.
you seeing that you know cyber threats or internet security are rising topics in these NOGs?
Always. I mean, like if I can give you an example, in 2020, actually, the working group from these NOGs, from the people involved, not only with these NOGs, but in general with Internet Society, they actually made manners, which is like a mutually agreed norm of routing security.
Mm-hmm.
And this was created by these members, and now they do not enforce it, but they are pushing it for all the network operators out there to follow through and to respect some basic recommendation that they made for making the internet a bit a more secure place for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I
have another. Oh,
I
go ahead.
also would like to highlight the organization called FIRST. Their website is first.org, and for incident responders and certs, it's one of the best organization where there can be information shared between these silos.
And
Like
are the topics broad within FIRST?
Yes, and I just checked. They have like 600 members worldwide. So that's a lot of collaboration going on there.
Okay, that's a useful tip. I have another question coming from Charles. One thing bringing social media is connecting to third-party apps by giving access. True?
Say that again.
I'm not sure I understand the question. One thing bringing social media is connecting to third-party apps by giving access. And then
maybe
true?
how Facebook authentication works or something.
So using Facebook to log into something?
That's what I'm guessing.
Probably.
Charles, maybe you can be a bit more specific for us. We'll move on, and if you can be a bit more specific, then I'll bring up your question again.
Jump back a little bit about the communities. One thing that I wanted to mention is the European NISP community, where it's being powered by Circle in Luxembourg, where you can run the system where in different organizations, they are actually actively forming different communities, a NATO community, financial community, and other communities by running a software that is able to exchange indicators of compromise, share the results of investigations, what's happening, and so on. So if somebody wants to get involved in CTI, active CTI community, they can always look at MISP, which is open source and it's free as well.
And that's NISP, right?
MISP, Michael. M.
Okay,
yes.
MISP. Thank you. Very, very useful tip there. Okay, so there's a few tips that have been given out there. This is what I wanted to pull out of you folks, which is great. Thank you. So, you're saying that a community kind of exists out there, that, maybe there's a new style of the way community discusses things. Social media was brought up as one of the platform. And now we've come up with this first.org, a MISP. These are obviously kind of maybe more community style open source platforms that people are using. Anything else that you think is there enough being done in the community? Maybe that's the question. And how do I get involved if I want to push this through?
I think we still see a lot of segmentation in the community. I came previously from about 20 some years of banking, and banking and commercial banks and financial institutions seem to have their own NOG, right? And they talk about different things. They have different threat vectors. They're kind of concerned about different things. But I guess the baseline is still the same, where we have threats like ransomware. We have threats like distributed denial of service. I think that's one place we are lacking is having a central roll-up or some kind of a larger group or initiative that really kind of culminates some of this information into one body. I think we're kind of lacking in that. Even in the United States, we might have some roll-ups to maybe some governmental organizations, but we still don't have like a clear international group or an idea or a collaborative, in my opinion.
So there isn't one. Like, for instance, you got RIPE, in Europe for all the IP stuff, or ARIN, or you've got the EPF, the European Peering Forum, and everybody that's involved with peering goes there, and everyone involved with kind of IP issues goes to RIPE. There isn't one that you can single out in maybe this cyber threat area or internet security area.
I can't. I'm not sure if any of the other panelists have thoughts on that.
Well, there is an info security event, quite big one, held usually in London. Well, I haven't been there since the COVID, but it used to be quite large, like 10,000 attendees. Everybody involved in info security, starting from the DDoS part with towards hijacking, towards ransomware, towards any type of security solutions. And of course, they had a lot of workshops, and it was held for a couple of days.
Okay. And then are there working groups or things you can actually attach on without physically going to this event where information would be exchanged? I'm looking for that kind of community area.
Well, there is a buzz around it, but only like when it's getting closer to the conference itself, like when there are like just a few days left, maybe 1 month. But the rest of the year, I cannot say I saw like a community around it, or I wasn't personally very, very involved with this part also, but so maybe there is something I can look into it.
Okay. I have another question here from Ned. Imagine you notice a tweet with a link to leaked sensitive data from your company. What is the course of action that you would take?
I would start my virtual machine and start the Tor browser and check the link.
Validate it first, right?
Yeah.
I usually forward it to our team specialized in checking this type of things. So I'm not touching anything usually. I'm not allowed to.
Notifying InfoSec is the first thing that you need to do.
Exactly.
First course of action, run to InfoSec. Okay. All right. I hope that answers your question, Ned. All right. So, and maybe you can note your favorite open source project or platform, or kind of threat intelligence sharing. I've heard FIRST. I've heard MISP being brought up. Does anyone have any other?
I lately kind of came across interesting project from Czech Republic that is called NERD, Network Entity Reputational Database. They are feeding off of another Czech project that is called Warden, that collects reputation and threat intelligence around the world. So these are things that you might look at. Again, maybe looking at the SOC perspective, things like Hive, the Hive project, or alongside with the Cortex are interested in the same list that I mentioned.
Okay, good. I really wanted to thank you guys for sharing these, because I wanted to get out some of the areas that are maybe open source and accessible without people having to travel to events. Not everyone can travel, but still has cyber threat mitigation is something that falls on their plate. Right. I have another question. This question might be off topic a bit, but as cybersecurity analysts, how do you look at IT auditors? Do they work hand on hand with cybersecurity teams?
I believe that IT auditors, they do important work, but whenever you see a company in the news headlines that company has been breached, I'm pretty sure that by IT audit they were compliant. So it's a bare minimum you have to do, but as it is always with cybersecurity, the devil is in the details, and you have to go above and beyond IT audits.
Okay, and so in other words, the question goes on. In other words, are they considered lower level or equal as cybersecurity analysts? And what are the differences in the tasks between the two? Maybe we can touch on that quickly. It is a little off topic, but a good question.
I think some of the, you can get a great set of auditors and you can get a very immature set of auditors. And I think that is probably the only real answer to that question, where, if you get an auditor that has some experience in cybersecurity analysis and they jump over to the audit segment, that they're probably going to have some value and bring some value. But if you have somebody that comes right out of college, has been in audit their whole life, they don't see some of the active things that are happening. They don't understand some of the pressures that are on cybersecurity analysts. They don't really get it. They're checking boxes on an audit, and I hate saying that, but they're looking for evidence, making sure evidence exists, and checking boxes and moving on to the next item.
But we probably have to kind of differentiate between the audits and the pen tests, which sometimes are called audits as well. So
Yes.
If you would ask me about the auditors, yeah, I would agree with the gentleman here that they do the paperwork. Some of them do it better. Some of them do it less better, let's put it that way. But when we talk about red teams and the proper red teams, I think that they can show some things that security analysts simply they are working from different positions to find out those things. Basically, they are working from protection, and sometimes they miss things that are only visible on the offense side. How people react and do stuff, and how systems are being set up. What is the kill chain, or what is the chain of command? How do you enter the environment, and so on. So the good red team, in my mind, is a very good friend of security analysts. And they just have to get across that boundary where they have a mutual distrust to each other, and they think they're enemies. They are best friends if they talk in the same language, and they understand that none of them are trying to kind of harm them. They're trying to show the truth.
Okay, I have another question here. Thank you, Andreas, for that. From Luca. Do you think remote or in-house DDoS protection is better? Virgil, this is clearly yours.
Well, it depends how good you are on doing it. I mean, I personally don't know a lot of companies able to build their own DDoS mitigation, because there are a lot of factors involved, starting from the bandwidth capacity, as an example, and then going to the more complex part, where you need like a big team of DDoS engineers, DDoS security engineers that know what to do and how to build the solution itself. And just as an example, nowadays you have like both the volumetric attacks, and then you have the more complex attacks like protocol or application type attacks, so layer 7. While the volumetric attacks are like 60%, so we've noticed a huge shift towards more complex attacks. And you have two types of resources here that are really, really expensive. First one is the bandwidth. And just to give you an example, Microsoft announced in January that they receive a 3.47 terabit per second DDoS attack on their Azure servers. So there are entire countries that don't have this traffic in their peak hours. Imagine that
Mhm.
you would need to have this capacity available to be able to take in that attack. And then we're talking about the more complex attacks where you need skilled engineers. And we were just talking about lacking 3.5 million security engineers earlier. So if you can do it, it will take you a lot of time and a lot of resources, but you do have a lot of remote options out there. And you have where to choose from depending on what you're facing and what you want to do, of course. You have cloud-based solutions, you have hardware box solutions. You can build a hybrid solution where you combine a hardware vendor with a cloud-based vendor that, of course, the hardware box vendor can help you with mitigating the lower DDoS attacks, while using a cloud provider, you have also coverage for the volumetric attacks, like that can overwhelm your network capacity or even your infrastructure provider network capacity.
Can I add from a business perspective?
Sure.
I think from a business perspective, if you are not in DDoS business, like providing a DDoS service, you would struggle a lot to build up a business case that would be financially sound to provide in-house DDoS protection for your backend systems. Even being a big bank, it still has a lot of technical things that you have to look at, like Virgil mentioned.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, obviously, Virgil, you folks are there. Your names are up on these screens, and I hope that these individuals will take the time to contact you to get a better understanding of where they can get involved if they need to do that after this webinar. I've got one more question from Charles, and then I'm going to wrap this up. I can see that the question has been answered from Ned on here on the chat line. That's brilliant. We've got chat going on here live, and then also in text here on the side. Brilliant. I like this. A good engagement. I have the question from Charles here. Is a system open to log4j vulnerability open to cyber attack? Can internal firewalls prevent log4j attacks? Does anybody know about this?
How do we define firewalls? Like, if it's the regular firewall working on the TCP IP level, then clearly not. If it's an application level firewall which can see all the data, which is nowadays encrypted, so probably it cannot see that data. Yeah, if it can understand, then yes, it has a chance, but otherwise it's hard.
To an extent, I would say it depends on the internal firewall and how rigid are you around the configuration of the firewalls. Because when we start talking about internal firewalls, it's usually far from being ideal. Let's put it that way. Because the favorite way of solving application problem is allowing any through the firewall.
Okay. All right. Well, that's the answer. Thank you very much. Actually, this brings us pretty much to the end of this webinar. This webinar is kind of paving the way for more targeted or topical discussions for maybe other webinars that are concentrating a bit on cyber threat or internet security. So I'm happy that we've got the audience actually asking some questions. But at IPXO, they want to hear what it is that you'd like to concentrate on. So if there's any targeted topics or topical discussion you want to have, we'll find the panelists and the experts for this in the future. So I just wanted to make that clear. This is probably one in a series of webinars we want to do in this kind of an area. But I want to thank very much our panelists here, Zoltan, Virgil, Thomas, Andreas. Thomas, sorry, I keep saying Thomas in a European accent.
Is great.
Here. Thomas is great.
Yep.
I thank you very much for sharing your expertise and for being open with everyone here. And thanks very much for an interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you. Okay. And a special thanks to IPXO for hosting the webinar. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Indeed.
So goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Take care.